You've probably heard it a million times, right? Exercise for your mental health. It's good advice for sure, but we hear it so often it kind of just washes over us. But what if we've been missing a huge piece of the puzzle? What if the specific kind of exercise you do is the real game changer? Well, a massive new study just gave us some incredibly specific answers, so let's get into it.
And when I say massive, I am not kidding. This wasn't just one small experiment. Researchers pulled together data from 63 different studies, covering almost 80,000 people. So think of it less like a single snapshot and more like a super high-resolution map of all the evidence. It gives these findings some serious weight.
And all that data led them to this one central question. Yeah, we know exercise helps with mental health, but we tend to lump depression and anxiety together. They're actually very different conditions, right? So should the exercise medicine for both of them really be the same? That's exactly what these scientists wanted to know. Is it time for a much more tailored approach?
Okay, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to look at why one size fits all just doesn't cut it. Then, we'll dive into the specific prescription for depression, and then the very different approach for anxiety. After that, we'll talk about a powerful factor that helps both, and finally, we'll tackle the big one: how effective is exercise as an actual treatment?
So let's start with the single biggest headline from this whole analysis. The best exercise for depression is not the best exercise for anxiety. It's as simple as that. To get the most bang for your buck, you have to match the movement to what your mind needs, which means we need to start thinking in terms of an exercise prescription.
So what do I even mean by that? Well, an exercise prescription isn't just someone saying, hey, you should go for a run. No, it's a detailed plan, almost like a medical prescription. It gets specific about the type of activity, the intensity, how long you do it for, and how often, all designed to hit a specific therapeutic goal.
Okay, so let's get into those specifics. What did this huge study find was the most effective exercise plan for people dealing with symptoms of depression? The data actually points to a super clear 4-part plan.
So here it is for depression. First up, the best type is aerobic exercise. We're talking running, walking, cycling, that kind of thing. The ideal intensity is moderate. A good rule of thumb is you should be able to hold a conversation, but you probably couldn't belt out a song. Now, this isn't a quick fix. The biggest benefits really showed up with long-term consistency, like 24 weeks or more. But here's the really good news. It only took 1 to 3 solid workouts a week to make a real difference.
All right, so that's the playbook for depression. But now let's pivot to anxiety. Does that same plan work for a mind that's already feeling revved up and overstimulated? The study found the answer is a big, fat no. The prescription for anxiety looks totally different. So aerobic is still the way to go, but check out the details here. For anxiety, low-intensity movement was way more effective. Think gentle, sustainable, not pushing yourself to the max. In fact, going too hard was actually less beneficial. And it makes sense, right? High intensity can sometimes feel a lot like the physical symptoms of a panic attack. And unlike the long-haul approach for depression, the biggest benefits here came from short-term plans, up to about 8 weeks, doing just 1 or 2 sessions a week.
Putting them side by side like this makes the main point so incredibly clear. For depression, you're looking at moderate intensity over the long term. For anxiety, it's low intensity with a short-term focus. It's just a powerful reminder that when it comes to our mental health, more isn't always better, and gentler definitely isn't weaker. It's all about finding the right specific approach.
So we've seen how different the prescriptions are, but was there anything that worked great for both? Yep, absolutely. The study found one factor that boosted the benefits for everyone. And you know what? It has nothing to do with your heart rate or how long you work out. It was the social element. It turns out that exercising as part of a group, whether it was a running club, a yoga class, or some kind of team sport, it just made everything better for both depression and anxiety. And this effect was especially strong for folks dealing with depression, which really highlights how much that sense of connection matters. And the researchers themselves have a pretty good idea why. They suggest that this psychological sense of belonging gives its own therapeutic boost. See, it's not just about the physical movement. It's about the motivation, the support, and that fundamental human need to be part of a community. So all of this leads us to the big final question. We know exercise helps, but just how much does it help? With these specific, tailored plans, could exercise actually be considered a primary treatment for depression and anxiety? The study's conclusion on this is pretty stunning. Okay, this is where my mind was kind of blown. The researchers found that when the exercise plan was tailored correctly, its effectiveness was comparable to traditional frontline treatments like medication and psychotherapy. Let that sink in. That's a huge statement about the power of movement as medicine. Because of that, and because exercise is pretty accessible, it's cost-effective, and it comes with all those other physical benefits, the researchers suggest it could totally be considered a first-line intervention, especially for managing mild to moderate symptoms.
But, and honestly, this is the most important but in this whole explainer. Because even with all this incredibly promising evidence, exercise is not a universal cure.
And we have to be crystal clear on this. For anyone with moderate to severe symptoms, professional support from doctors and therapists is absolutely essential. Exercise can be an amazing, powerful part of a treatment plan, but it should not replace prescribed medication or therapy unless you're guided by a medical professional. Always, always talk to your doctor or mental health professional before you change anything about your care plan.
So the science gives us a much smarter, more nuanced way to think about that link between our bodies and our minds. It hands us a more specific, more powerful toolkit. The only question left is the one that's personal to each of us. Now that you know this, how are you going to choose to move?